I'm Joan, and as it was said, I'm the very proud mother of Kate. Over the next 10 minutes, I hope to give you a parent's perspective on clinical trials. As a matter of background, I'm a corporate securities attorney by trade, and I currently work part-time for an IT company. My husband, Jim, who's in the second row over here, we've been married for 23 years and have been raising two wonderful daughters in the western suburbs of Chicago. 5.5 years ago, our seemingly normal existence changed forever with one phone call from our pediatrician. I had taken Katie in because she had experienced sore joints for about a month, although she was doing 3 sports clinics at the time, so we thought there was a reason for it. But then she started developing bruising that she couldn't explain. After seeing her, the pediatrician ordered a blood test and then said to the side, she said, I think it's probably a platelet disorder brought on by a virus. And then she noted that in Katie's chart how healthy a child she was and that she'd only had antibiotics only once in 12 years. Unfortunately, that streak didn't continue. For what seemed like an eternity, our pediatrician called and in tears told me that Katie had leukemia and that we should head immediately to Children's Memorial Hospital for treatment. That was the first of many trips to Children's. After 27 months of treatment, she finally was done. We were all so excited, thinking, thank goodness that's over. We can start getting back to normal again. And we did for 14 months. Unfortunately, one and done was not in the plan for us. In a Tahitian hospital, on what was supposed to be a trip of a lifetime, we heard the awful words again, I'm so sorry, it's back. Since then, we have been fighting cancer again with every ounce of energy we have while trying to live life to the fullest possible. As I've found with most cancer patient parents, your life becomes divided in 2 periods. One is before cancer and the other is after cancer. Although things are the same in both periods, there are other things that are dramatically different. You just don't view things the same way after someone says your child has cancer and they could die. One thing I view very differently is clinical trials. To be honest, before Katie got sick, I really didn't think about them very much. It was more something you saw on TV where you either saw a child being unnecessarily tortured or you saw the case where there was a miracle drug, but the parents only got it for the child after they had to fight the insurance and drug companies for it. Since Katie's diagnosis, my view of clinical trials really bring to mind 2 words. The first word is grateful. As Katie mentioned, her first clinical trial was for Rowinia. I'm very grateful for this trial. I was so scared when Katie reacted to PEG. First, I was afraid of the reaction itself. It began almost immediately after the IV infusion started. Her nurse said she had never seen someone react so quickly. She turned all red and she said, Mom, my throat is starting to close. They immediately stopped the infusion and gave her drugs to combat the reaction. Once her reaction was under control, I was then afraid of what it would mean for her cancer treatment. PEG was a major drug in the treatment for leukemia. Given the severity of the reaction, she could never have it again. But then a wonderful thing happened. Without lifting a finger, Katie's doctor came to us and said, would you like to participate in a clinical trial for a potentially viable alternative, Rowinia? Years earlier, our friends had a very different experience with the same situation. Their son, Paul, reacted the same way as Katie did to PEG. Unfortunately, it was before the clinical trial that allowed for it to be given via slow IV infusion, and his was done via shots. His reaction was so bad he ended up in ICU for a week until the medicine wore off. Katie was almost given her IV, her PEG via shots, but then her nurse noted, oh no, she's part of the new protocol. Literally, and she got into the new protocol by about a week. And, so they gave it to her via the IV infusion. When the reaction happened, her nurse told us, you should be grateful that she's part of the new protocol because given the severity of her reaction, she would have at least ended up in ICU, and we try not to think about the worst case scenario. Again, the word grateful for clinical trials comes to mind. To join the Arwinia study, there was lots of paperwork to do. Even as a lawyer, used to reading lots of legal mumbo jumbo, I found the paperwork to be a bit overwhelming and not always clear. This is probably something that could be improved. As Katie described, the shots themselves were pretty awful, and they're a hard thing to watch if a parent hates to see their child in pain. Although Katie was not part of it, I'm grateful for the clinical trial that proved Arwinia was just as effective given via IV. When Katie relapsed, I thought of all the awful things she had to endure during her initial cancer treatment. Although I have to admit, going septic and almost dying was first, but the shots were a pretty close second. I am also grateful for the fertility preservation study. When you are first told your child has cancer, you think, please save my child. The next thing you think is, how is this going to affect my child's life? It's bad enough that your child has to endure all the terrible side effects of cancer treatment, at times uncontrollable nausea, fatigue, chemo brain, and especially for girls, hair loss. They also lose a big chunk of their childhood and grow up way too fast. At a minimum, we want them to have as normal life as possible after they're done, with all the opportunities their peers have. One question I've always asked is, how will this affect Katie's fertility? As Katie mentioned, we were first told, when she first received treatment, we told that it wouldn't impact it. But with the relapse and more intensive chemotherapy, this was no longer the case. Her fertility could be impacted. I have to say, being pregnant and having my daughters have been some of the greatest moments of my life. I wanted my daughter to have the same opportunity if she chose this path. With the fertility preservation study, she now has that choice. We all realize it is not certain it will work, but we are grateful that the research is being done to increase Katie's chances of having choices to have biological children. Katie does say having frozen ovary strips does add a new complexity to future relationships. She now has to ask the question, is this relationship ovary strip worthy defrosting? No, is this relationship ovary strip defrosting worthy? Also, she's had to endure some embarrassing moments because it's not certain that she can't have children on her own, and her doctor will remind her in front of me that she shouldn't go, crazy in college. Not something a 17-year-old wants to hear in front of their mother. I am also grateful for the other clinical trials we participated in, the fatigue study and the digital storytelling projects. These studies gave us a chance to give back. They are focused on making things better for other patients. Many times when you go through this experience, you realize there's ways that can be done better the next time. But except for telling other parents of your experiences and things that they can do, usually that information goes nowhere. Being able to make things better for other patients make you feel that at least some good can come out of a very terrible experience. I'm sure I make it seem like we sign up for every clinical trial experience available, but that is in fact not the case. We did turn one down. It was a study on the effect of drug adherence on relapse. They wanted to monitor Katie's taking of the drug 6-MP. It would involve the use of a special bottle that would track each time Katie took the drug. We turned down the study for two reasons. First, it would have been cumbersome to participate. At the time, Katie was taking 1.5 tablets of 6-MP, so every time we got the medicine, we'd have to cut up the pills, put them back in the bottle, in order for them to be monitored. Second of all, the only way you could get the bottle filled was at the hospital. And I have to be nothing personal, but we really don't like the hospital pharmacy. It's slow, and we would have to spend more time at the hospital. When you've been spending as much time as we have over the years, any amount of time extra is too much. And also, it's located not close to our home, so if we had to fill the medicine on an off day, it was just not a viable thing for us to do. The second reason we did not do it, honestly, was my view of the study's premise. It was trying to learn whether teens who were not religiously taking their 6-NP would have a higher incidence of relapse. Being the lawyer that I am, I made sure that Katie took every dose of her medicine during the first round of treatment. And, only when her doctor instructed would she not take it. All this, and she still relapsed. I still make certain she takes all her pills. However, I'm not convinced that a missed dosage here and there will truly make a difference. Simply put, lax compliance isn't why Katie relapsed in my mind. So we just couldn't find the energy to participate. When you're doing something like this and it's cumbersome, your heart really has to be in it. As I said earlier, clinical trials bring 2 words to mind. I have told you the first, grateful. The second one for me is hopeful. When you're living in the cancer world, you are too often reminded that not everyone survives. We have lost way too many family members and good friends. A number of them were children. After a while, you start to lose hope. However, when we do, we remind ourselves of all the recent advancements in the treatment of leukemia and cancer in general. These advancements would not be possible without clinical trials. It's assuring to know Katie will most likely have more options to treat her leukemia, and if God forbid, she should relapse again. This makes us hopeful and help pick ourselves up and fight another day. I'm concluding with a pitch and a request. It has often been said that we need to save our children from clinical trials. Katie and I could not disagree more. We actually need to have more clinical trials with children to save them. Katie and I have learned how important clinical trials have been for others when we attended the ICON conference in Barcelona last summer. Also, our story details how clinical trials have been critical for the quality and impact of Katie's treatment. Please do whatever you can to save our children, including mine. Thank you.